Hello friends, and welcome to Ariel's Twilight Years, how to be a really old model. I've had COVID this month. I got COVID in America and came home and immediately realised, oh, I'm really sick. So I isolated from my husband for 5 days, hoping that I hadn't given it to him in the first evening before I knew I was sick. And then after 5 days, he went down with COVID. So we're both repairing ourselves at the moment, and it's not the most fun thing in the world, but we are alive and I'm grateful for that. The subject of my video today, for which I am wearing an outfit that I made, thank you for noticing, you didn't notice, I'm just telling you, is a subject that is very much at the heart of why I started this channel. What I want to do is talk about ways in which the work that I get as a professional model has changed in the almost 20 years I've been modelling. I started modelling when I was 26 and I am now 45. I'm trying to be strict in terms of not talking about stuff that's changed in the industry, because lots of industry changes have happened in that 20 years and I've already addressed a lot of those in previous videos. So I want to talk specifically about what's changed because I am no longer 26 or 36. And I've divided those things up into two groups, ways in which I have changed my approach to modelling as a result of getting more and more experience, and things that have changed because of the way people see me as I've aged. So we're going to talk about both, and happily, they're not all bad things. The reason I want to make this video specifically is because I know a lot of models don't stay in this industry anywhere near long enough to get the real rewards from it. I have made a couple of videos about my income and it's kept going up. I don't think I can make another video because it feels too vulgar, but the rewards financially and professionally of being a model who's been modelling 20 years as opposed to 3 years, they are massive, and I want to encourage as many models as I can to stay in the industry if the reason you're considering leaving is because you're worried about being too old for it. Obviously people have lots of reasons for leaving this profession and that's absolutely fine, but I do want to try to bring some comfort to models who are frightened of aging out prematurely, because I hope that by going through this discussion you'll see that there are a lot of things you can do to mitigate the worst of the effects of getting older, and there are some really good things associated with becoming older and more experienced in your chosen field. So let's get started. So this is all the things that have changed from inside me as a result of getting older and becoming more experienced. First of all, objectively speaking, I am more skilled at posing, I'm more skilled at putting tours together, I'm better at doing the job efficiently. And specifically for posing, that in my first few months as a professional model, I remember seeing pictures. Back then people used to send you a CD with all the pictures from the shoot. My hit rate of good shots to bad shots was not fantastic because I was wildly experimental with how I posed. I was very creative and a lot of those poses looked terrible, especially naked. And it took me a while to refine those skills, and I expect I am still refining those skills. So now the number of good shots I can get in a session of photography is much higher than it was at the beginning. It's probably true I also take fewer artistic risks, because perhaps you could argue that a model who's very experienced can over-refine how she poses, and I'm aware the combination of vanity and experience makes me perhaps less willing than I once would have been to try something that might look awful or might look silly. But I think on balance, if you were to hire me as a new photographer for 2 hours, the number of good shots you'd get now would be higher than the number of good shots you'd have got back in 2003 when I started. And that makes me really happy, because I've always said modelling is a skilled job, despite the fact that I still hear people saying things that suggest to me they don't think so. And when I look at my work from 2003 through to 2015 through to 2022, I can see that this skilled job is something I've got better at in those 20 years, and that makes me really glad. This is a bit of a difficult one to say, and I want to say preemptively, I'm not looking for any comfort. I'm not sad about any of what I'm discussing. I just want to be realistic. because in the 20 years I've been modelling, I have probably become less confident in the way I look. I remember in my first year as a model, I had massive confidence in how I looked because I was suddenly being paid for how I looked. I remember going on a family holiday and wearing this tiny string bikini that I would never wear in public now, ever. I'd wear it for modelling, but I would never wear it by the pool. And I guess I was just feeling really good about my body, perhaps for the first time in my life. And I think that now I am very aware of the ways in which it's changed. I weigh the same as I did, more or less, when I started modelling. But my weight distribution is different, my skin tone is different, I've got wrinkles that I didn't used to have. My body isn't exactly the same, and I'm very aware of that because I'm in a profession where I see content of myself all the time. And I noticed that there are shoots I would probably turn down now because of worrying about how I'd look. Whereas when I was 26, I'd have taken that shoot and assumed I'd look just bloody great. So a good example of this is being photographed in midday sun without flash. When I started modelling, I'd have just done that, and if the pictures looked bad, I wouldn't have felt bad. I'd have just thought, well, the photographer didn't do a very good job. Whereas now, that harsh overhead light will show bits of me up in a way that I don't like, and so I probably just wouldn't do that shoot. And maybe that's a little bit sad, but I think it's also a good way of just protecting yourself from putting out terrible shots of yourself looking at your very worst, with a shadow of your nose landing right here on your chest. I call it the chest nose, and it's a terrible look, and I no longer feel so beautiful that I can carry off the very worst lighting that this beautiful world of ours can provide us with. Yeah. I am a great deal more confident with how this industry works and what is acceptable. Thank goodness. When I was a new model, and I know this is an experience many models have, I wasn't sure what was acceptable, so if someone did something unacceptable at a shoot, it would often take me months of working it through in my mind to realise that, well, I think I was just sort of taken advantage of there, or I was exploited there, or I wasn't really treated very respectfully. And now I'm much more likely to notice at the time, right, this isn't normal for the industry, I'm not going to accept that, and I'm either going to leave, or I'm going to ask the photographer to stop, or I'm going to control the situation better. And thank goodness, it's one of the things that I know I keep talking about, that I do think you become safer and safer the longer you're in this industry, and it's a really unfortunate fact that a lot of your bad experiences will be towards the beginning of your career, where people think they can take advantage of you, and sadly often they are right, because you maybe just don't have the confidence that you have later in your career, and you also don't have the money you might have later in your career, where walking away from a day's photo shoot isn't going to be catastrophic for your finances that month. So I definitely notice that I am less receptive to photographers pushing their luck, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think the longer photographers know you have been modelling for, the less likely the exploitative ones are to book you in the first place, and if they do book you, I think they're more likely to behave decently when they know you've got a good amount of experience behind you and that you probably won't put up with nonsense. I am much less likely to risk my body. Partly this is because I know I have aged and I know my body is more vulnerable, but I also think I have a more realistic attitude to how much a shot is worth. And at the beginning of my career, if someone asked me to jump 50 times on a concrete floor, I'd have thought I had to because they needed the shot and they were paying me £40 an hour or whatever my rate was back then. And if that meant I had to go and get physio for a month afterwards to recover, then that was my job. Whereas now I'd be much more likely to realistically think, well, it's going to cost me £200 in physio if I injure myself at this shoot. He's only paying me £50 an hour. It's not worth it to potentially impact on all the work I've got lined up for the rest of the month, and I'm not going to put my body through something that doesn't make sense for it. And that's a really nice thing to discover. When I look back at the first couple of years of my career, I was in a lot of pain a lot of the time because I just hadn't learned yet to say no to unrealistic requests from photographers, or even requests that would be perfectly reasonable if they were asked of another model but weren't reasonable for me because of my personal injuries or my own physical limitations. So I've got much better at being conservative with my body's resources on the day in order to preserve them so I can carry on doing this job in the future. And it's really difficult to do at first because it makes you feel really mean and unobliging, but it's really important. So I no longer take any shoots at all where I have to jump. Not because I can't jump anymore, but I can't jump 50 times and I can't get you the shot you want if your timing isn't sufficient for getting the shot quickly if it's an action shot. And I've just realised I don't want to sacrifice the health of my joints for someone's beautiful picture, because I love beautiful photography, but it's not worth my long-term health. And I always like it when I see models getting to that point where they start limiting the more extreme activities that they will do on camera. So I see people saying things like, you can book me for point work, but I can't do it for 8 hours, for example. And it's a really, really great thing to learn, because you can push yourself far too much and it can be so detrimental to your body. And that means it can be detrimental to your long-term career. As well as jumping, I now know to just say no to outdoor shoots in winter. I know there are models who can do it. I'm not one of those models. And I used to take those bookings and just hope it was going to be warm enough, and it never was, not for me. And I've just learned it's better to not take the money, not make a promise that I won't be able to deliver well, because although I never just no-showed, I would turn up and I don't think I did the best job, because I don't work very well when I'm really, really cold. There are models who are better suited to it, and there are places in the world that you will do better naked in, and Wolverhampton in December is not one of those places. I think I am less confident, as I've just said, in the raw materials of how I look. You know, I am aware that my body is not a 26-year-old's body, and it doesn't look like a 26-year-old's body, and that's absolutely fine, but I am aware of needing to compensate. And fortunately, you can compensate as a model, and I have compensated, because although probably my skin isn't as good as it was, and my face isn't as young as it was, my styling skills are a whole lot better. As many models will have discovered before me, you can compensate for what goes wrong with your raw materials by just being better at styling and better at posing. So this feels like a pretty neutral thing. I'm sure at some point I won't be able to get my styling skills any better to compensate for how I age in the future. But at the moment, in this 20-year period, I look at pictures of myself in the first year when I started modelling, and I look young, but I don't think I necessarily look better than now, because I didn't know how to style my eyebrows, I did terrible eyeshadow, I didn't always choose good clothing at all, I didn't know what to do with my hair, and all of those things I've got better at in the last 20 years, and as a result, some of my favourite shots are of me at 45, and I'm really happy to be able to say that. I won't travel anymore for really small amounts of money. When I was a new model, of course, not having a big client base yet, I found myself doing what I'm sure a lot of new models do, travelling for 4 hours for a 2-hour shoot, and now I would just say no to that shoot and I would stay at home and earn money here. And I am aware that as a result, it would be easy for your client list to keep shrinking, and so I'm very aware of that I don't want to overly shrink my client list. I still want to travel for work, but I won't travel for a 2-hour booking anymore. My minimum booking time when I started modelling was 1 hour, and I did do some 1-hour bookings if they were local to me, and now my minimum booking time is 4 hours, and that is something I probably couldn't have afforded to do when I was a new model, but it's really lovely when you get to a point where you can do that because your client base is large enough that you don't have to take the shoots that make marginal sense financially. And finally, and I've touched on this already, but I have become more safety conscious, not just about the potential for injuring my body from being too ambitious with posing, but I'm much more likely to ask a photographer if he has insurance for a more extreme photo shoot. Like, as I know I've mentioned in a previous YouTube video, a photographer wanted me to pose with a tiger, and I asked if he had insurance for it, which at the beginning of my career I wouldn't have bothered to ask. I'd have just been optimistic and hoped for the best and wanted to please him by saying yes. I am sadly more aware that a photographer might be booking me with the intention of doing something inappropriate, so I check references more carefully, and I'm much more likely to ask questions like, what are the local laws about nudity, for example. Back when I started modelling, I would take the photographer's word for it that we would be allowed to be where we were, doing what we were doing. Now, having had the police turn up at a few shoots, I would be much more likely to say, what happens if we are found doing this? Will we would get put on the sex offenders register? What are the consequences? And I'm much more likely to research that kind of thing for myself and be much more judicious in the choices of work I do. I am more aware of the risks. When I was 25, I just assumed that everyone would have my best interests at heart and that I'd be okay. And now, sadly, I am aware that photographers don't necessarily always research what they're doing, and they can lead you into doing something that is either dangerous or illegal or both. That photographers are sometimes actually booking a model so that they can be alone with a naked woman. And I'm aware that the only person who can really take responsibility for my safety is me. And if I don't think climbing on a rickety ladder with high heels is a good idea, then I'm the one who needs to call a halt to that shoot. So those are the things that have changed in my career in the last 20 years. And honestly, I think most of them are a pretty good thing and I feel pretty comfortable with them. But much more potentially painful is talking about things that have changed because of how people view me as I've got older. So let's get on to that. Well, I'm no longer booked for sites like MetArt/FemJoy/Domi. At the beginning of my career, those websites were the kind of really high status art nude work. I mean, they weren't really art nude, perhaps they were when they began, but they do have an aesthetic which is quite youthful. And it's been a very long time since anyone has sidled into my messages asking to book me for FemJoy or similar. I feel really fine about that. There are definitely some sites which I think will probably not book me again, having booked me multiple times in the past, and that just seems perfectly fine and inevitable. It's actually been a nice surprise how many sites have continued to book me, including lots of sites that on their model call will say something like models up to the age of 30 or up to the age of 35, but in reality they're still booking me and I'm 45, and I'm sure I'm not the only person over the official age bracket who is getting regular work from them, which is a really nice thing to realise. So although if you look at castings it's easy to get the impression that you really need to be under 30, at least my experience is that that is not the case at all. Oh, another type of work that I don't seem to get much anymore is the kind of art nude workshops where maybe a well-known photographer will book you as the model, and then there'll be a group of photographers learning from the established photographer during the day, and you'll just pose for all of them. And to be honest, although I enjoyed some of those shoots very much towards the beginning of my career, I remember by 2012, so I would have been 35, I was doing a lot of them and I was finding they were physically incredibly hard because the sheer number of poses you have to do in a day when you're working for 8 photographers is just a lot, and because they would tend to watch each other and then ask you to replicate the poses they liked best, and often the poses they liked best were the most physically challenging ones because they're the ones that have got some rarity value. I found myself doing some really painful stuff over and over again in not the best conditions, and so moving away from those kind of shoots is absolutely fine. It doesn't feel like a sacrifice at all. I'm glad to have done them, but I don't need to do them anymore. I still do like doing studio residencies where I work with one photographer at a time through the day, and to be honest that is also more physically challenging than working with one photographer more often than not, but I still feel like I'm young enough to be able to do that, although I do find it more tiring than I used to. Yeah, if you'd asked me at the beginning of my career what would change as I got older, I think I'd have thought that people would stop booking me for glamour, because I saw glamour modelling as a very kind of 18 to 25 young person's game. But the fact is, I still do lots of glamour, and when I think about the sort of cheesiest glamour that I did when I started modelling, and I don't mean this as a criticism, I actually really love cheesy glamour, but at the beginning of my career a glamour shoot might have involved me wearing ridiculous furry clubbers boots and cut off jeans shorts and a t-shirt with My Little Pony on it, cuddling a teddy bear in my lingerie, that sort of thing. Now, the cheesiest glamour shoots I would do would be much more likely to be elbow-length satin gloves and a formal hat with a veil and stockings and suspenders. And so the styling has changed to be slightly more age appropriate, I guess. But it's still still the same thing. It's trying to make something sort of playful and sexy. And so although the styling has changed, the places where I'm shot, the sorts of poses I'm doing for those kind of shoots are basically exactly the same, and that's fine with me. One sad thing that's happened is actually a female producer said she didn't want to shoot me wearing school uniform anymore because I looked too old. Now, to be honest, I don't think I looked like a schoolgirl when I was a schoolgirl, so I honestly don't think me at 26 or me at 35 in a school uniform ever looked particularly appropriate. And honestly, am I going to stop wearing a school uniform for my own stuff? Probably not. Another type of work that I no longer get is being taken away by an individual photographer to a location abroad for a week or 2 weeks. When I started modelling, I did that a lot. And I think the main reason that's actually changed is that I've become more expensive. So I used to offer really good deals for people if they took me away for a week because I'd not been abroad much. I found it really exciting. And if I only got £300 or £500 from the week, that felt fine. Whereas now I wouldn't dream of doing that. And so that work has stopped completely. Now I'm much more likely to take myself somewhere under my own steam, on my own expense, and then book individual shoots while I'm there, which, to be honest, I find much better because I'm pretty introverted. I like having some time on my own, and so being away with a photographer for a week can be quite a social pressure. And so I would actually prefer to work with multiple people and then have some evenings where I just do my own thing. That works for me psychologically, and also as I've got busier, I've got a lot more admin to do in the evenings, so actually I'd be a much less sociable model to take away on a kind of photographic holiday these days. And the really lovely thing about being older / more established is that as I've got a bigger client base and people are more likely to know who I am before they work with me, it's much easier to get people to come to me. So for example, if I was to travel to Holland for work, I'd be much less likely to spend a whole week travelling round the country. I'd be much more likely to book a lovely location and offer for photographers to come to me. It's a much more age-appropriate way of touring because I don't have to carry a suitcase around on public transport so much, and that has been very, very good for my crumbling spine. And finally, and this is not something I would have expected, but as I've got older, I've discovered people book me because of my age. So this sounds a bit sinister, probably, as though people book me because they've sort of fetishised my age. And I'm sure there is that. There's plenty of the kind of MILF work that I get to do. Lots of playing teachers, headmistresses, dressed up as a sort of cougar, a sexy older lady. There is some sort of fetishisation of the fact that I'm not 25 anymore. But also I think there's quite a lot of photographers who are older who just want a peer. They perhaps aren't that comfortable with a naked 25-year-old in their house, and they are more comfortable with a naked 45-year-old, and I am there for those photographers. I'm very glad, because I don't think that's something I would have necessarily have expected, and I'll be very interested to see in the next 10 or 20 years of my career what that does, how that changes. Will I get fetishised in a different way? Will people want me to be playing like a sort of desperate granny? I don't know. I'm waiting to find out, and I'm very interested. So what do I expect from the future? I have made no secret of the fact I want to stay in this career for as long as I can. I absolutely love it. I can't see that changing anytime soon, and if I'm lucky enough not to get sick or injured to the extent that I can't model anymore, I hope this will be my career for the rest of my life. So what do I expect? I think noticing models who are older than me, and I've got several modelling friends who are quite significantly older than me, I think that I would be expecting the amount of nude work I do to gradually decrease. I don't think I'm there now, but I can see in 10 or 20 years' time I might want to do stuff where I'm wearing more hosiery, more corsets, more kind of shapewear, because I imagine that my comfort with how my body looks might decrease a bit further. I can imagine I might do a lot more fully clothed stuff. I already noticed I've started shooting more more things in sweaters and tights than I used to, which I very much enjoy, and I can imagine that will continue to drift. I imagine maybe in 10 years time I'll be doing a lot more stuff with silk scarves and roll neck sweaters and suits and fully clothed outfits. I think as time goes on I am also likely to do more and more video, because whereas I might not be able to compete in terms of looks with a 25-year-old, my skill at improvised video is not going to get any worse. I hope it will just keep getting better. So I imagine I'll be able to leverage my ability in video as my ability to look absolutely amazing in still shot might decrease. And again, that would be totally fine with me. I certainly imagine I will be doing less dance modelling in the future. When I started modelling, I did an awful lot of that. And 10 years into my career, I realised I had to start phasing that out a little because it was just so detrimental to my body. And 10 years on from that, I'm doing less of it than ever. And I think maybe in another 10 years time, I might not be doing any point work at all, or perhaps any acrobatic type modelling. I think I might want to keep both feet on the floor quite a lot more, but I will be glad that I did it while I could. I never thought that I'd be able to spin around upside down and do handstands forever, and I'm really happy that I've got pictures that will remind me of the time when I could. But that said, I'm going to keep trying to do it because I still love it. I like the challenge, and so I guess I just won't book days where I am expected to do a lot of it. I think I might want to be a little bit more gentle and improvisational with myself than that. I certainly envisage doing more self-shot work for a couple of reasons. One, because as I get older I might want to travel a bit less. Two, that as I get older having control over the edit might become more important to me, because I might not trust other people to make me look the way I want to look if I'm starting to feel a bit less physically confident with my raw materials. And I think I might do more self-shot work simply because as time goes on I make more contact and there are more people booking me for self-shot work, and since I enjoy it that was very likely to happen. I think I'm much more likely to employ other models because that's already happening, and to employ photographers, which is already happening. So I like to think that maybe in the next 10 to 20 years I will be repaying some of the kindness of people who hired me early on in my career and made it possible for me to pay my rent and then get a house and pay my mortgage. I'm hoping that I can keep giving back by hiring people myself. I certainly hope so. So that is what I expect to, if I'm lucky, happen over the next 10 to 20 years. And I'd love to think that when I'm 65 I might be still running my YouTube channel. I have no idea if I'll be that lucky, but I would love it if that is what happened. So what I guess I can guarantee, or what I can promise, that I'm going to keep shooting work that represents me as a submissive, because for as long as that is my sexual identity, I'm going to want to represent myself truthfully. I can't see myself drifting towards being a dom on screen just because it's commercially more viable as you're older. I like being a sub, and me at 45 is just as submissive as I was at 35, and I am not willing for anyone to take that away from me. I'm going to keep doing sexy work. I don't see why I should stop, and I hope I won't give in to any kind of age shaming about, oh, what's she doing, like dressed up like that, mutton dressed as lamb. I hope I will just ignore all of that because I think it's nonsense. I'm going to keep touring because I love it, and as long as I'm healthy enough to do it, I want to go around the world meeting new people and having new experiences. I think it's kept me young, and it's certainly kept me very, very happy, and I don't want to stop that. And I promise myself that I will not stop working with new people. It's tempting because I've had some bad experiences, and I've referenced some of those in more recent YouTube videos, and I find myself being reticent to book shoots with new photographers or photographers who are new to me in favour of just working with people I know and trust. But I promise myself that I'm not going to let that happen. I am going to keep working with new people, and I'm going to get over my fears about what those people might do. I'm just going to try to be sensible. I'm going to check references carefully, and I'm going to keep doing this lovely job that has given me so much happiness and so much financial security. Thank you to everyone everyone who's booked me over the years, all the people who are not predators or who tried to dangle me off the edge of a cliff at least. I will hope to be around for a very much longer time, and maybe I'll do an updated version of this video in a decade's time to see if I'm right about what has in fact changed in my career. Thank you as always for watching. I'll be back next month, hopefully finally, with the great big giant exciting announcement, which is just taking this month to organise, but it is very exciting. So please like, subscribe, it makes me feel so happy and it means the world. And I will be back. Goodbye now, bye bye, bye bye now.